soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God.
All right, good morning. Glad to have everybody here. Welcome to those watching online. Any given Sunday, we have maybe 30 devices turned in watching online, so we appreciate those of you who do that. I appreciate those who prayed for me and checked on me when I had my procedure last week. Everything went well, so I'm thankful for that and appreciate your prayers. Today we're talking about delegating. You may not think of that as a Bible topic, but I think that it is. I think we'll see today that it is. We're using the Bible, of course, also using a book by a guy named Tommy South. His picture's there on the screen. He's the preacher for the Glen Allen, Virginia Church of Christ, and he's written a book that we're using to give us an outline, and the book is titled Shepherding the Flock of God, a practical guide to becoming and being an elder. So today we're on a chapter that's about delegating. And the scripture there is from Acts chapter 6, a good example from the Bible of delegation, and we'll get to that shortly. So delegation, that's a principle with broad application. All of us are familiar, I'm sure, with delegation, although we may not use that word to describe it. But let's look at some everyday applications of delegation to introduce this lesson. So what do you think? Why does a mom assign tasks to her children? Or why does a dad assign tasks to his children? Yes, sir. Jerry? All right, so part of the purpose is to help train those children for life, as Jerry said. Yeah, absolutely. That's one reason. I think there may be others. Why do parents assign tasks to their children? To teach them accountability and responsibility. Let's say, what did you say, Paul?
Not be the only one working.
Yeah, not be the only one working. It may be that it actually reduces the workload for mom or for dad if one of the kids mows the lawn or empties the dishwasher.
My great-granny had 15 she was taking care of, so she delegated a lot.
All right. Paul said his great-grandmother had 15 kids to assign tasks to. Somebody else said something back here. Share the workload. Yeah, share the workload. So lots of good reasons. We may not call that delegating, but really I think it is. Share the load, to help train, all kinds of good reasons.
Some responsibility.
Teach them to assume responsibility. Very good. Very good. Now, do you think the mom can do the job better than the kids in most cases? Probably. Probably the mom can do that task better than any of those kids can, at least initially. So that's something when we delegate, we'll have to accept that initially the person to whom we're delegating may not be able to do the job as well as we could do it. Maybe over time, but initially we just may have to accept, hey, it's going to take a little time here. What about business? Steve Riggs is just walking in. Steve started an accounting company. How big would that company be today if Steve insisted on doing every tax return himself? Not very big. Not very big. So today, Steve has a couple of thousand employees in that company, and no way he does every tax return. So that question just answers itself. Delegation in some cases is necessary. You can't, the job's too big. You can't get it done unless you delegate. About the military, why doesn't the general fight every battle? Again, the question just answers itself, right? There's no way. What's that? They're the general. They don't need to be out there fighting. They send others. That's what generals do. George Washington was a general, and he actually went into battle with his troops in the Revolutionary War. He was exposed to enemy fire. He was leading the troops. But I don't think that's what they teach at West Point today. Did you know that George Washington led troops when he was president? 1794, the Whiskey Rebellion. There was a group of farmers and distillers in western Pennsylvania that rose up in rebellion because their product was being taxed. Alexander Hamilton's idea, let's tax the distillers, make some money. And there was a rebellion, and George Washington actually led the troops to put down that rebellion. Now, you could argue he really wasn't in much danger. He had thousands of troops against a handful of ragtag rebellers. But it was a show of force. It made a point. Probably the last time a sitting president has led troops into battle. Sports, why doesn't the point guard take every shot? Why doesn't the point guard take every shot?
When they had to guard.
Yeah, everybody could guard him. Do you know that that actually happened pretty much on a sports team? Back when I was in high school playing basketball, there was a fellow playing for LSU named Pete Maravich. And Michael remembers Pete Maravich. He was nicknamed Pistol Pete Maravich. And he took virtually every shot for his team. His dad was the coach, so I guess he could get away with it. And he still, to this day, holds the record for the most points scored over a college career. And there was no three-point shot in those days. Freshmen could not play varsity. So he only played 80-something games in his whole career. But he scored 3,600-something points. Still today holds the record. Most points scored. He scored 69 points against Alabama in 1970. But yet, for all those points that he scored, in the 3 years that he played at at LSU, like 67-70, right in there. They never won a conference championship. They won more games than they lost, but not by much. So I wonder how much better that team might have been if the scoring had been more balanced. So church, why don't the elders do everything? That'd be simpler. Sam says they don't. Because they're only one person. Yeah, the question just answers itself. Maybe you've asked an elder one time a question and he said, I don't know. Are you irritated by that? You should know everything. You should know everything that's going on. Jesse. Yeah, so no command for the elders to do everything. In fact, I think that, first of all, I think hopefully we'll show in this lesson elders should delegate, number one. And number two, I think the church should want elders to delegate. So that's what we're going to look at today. Again, you may not have thought of this as a Bible topic, and there's no command to delegate, as Jesse said. There's no qualification for an elder that he be a good delegator. But I think for practical reasons, we'll see that it is something that elders should do. I used to think the bigger the church, the more the elders we need. I'm not sure I think that anymore. Now I lean more toward the bigger the church, the more delegating that we need. Michael and I were members at Gateway when there were 700 members and 3 elders. And it seemed to work well for them. But there was a lot of delegating. I was with a fellow named Noel Whitlock. Ross probably knows Noel. At that time, he was preaching minister for the college church in Searcy, Arkansas, where Harding University is located. I asked Noel, it's a big church. I asked Noel, how many elders do you have? He said, I don't know. Well, that surprised me a lot. Maybe 35, he said. And that surprised me again. I can't imagine what those elders' meetings were like. Or maybe I can imagine. And that's even worse. When we have elders' meetings, pretty much everybody gets a chance to express an input, elders and ministers both, on whatever we're talking about. It seems to me that would be impossible. I looked on their website. They actually have 28 today. 28 elders. Yes, sir.
Back when Gateway was moving into the building that they just vacated,
Right.
it was a new facility. They had those deacons up there building a new facility every night working.
Yeah. They had a good group of deacons who worked really hard. I was in a meeting with those, kind of off track here now, but here we go. T.C. Barnes, Lewis Ross, Michael, and I both remember those 3 elders. And they called a meeting. I guess it was deacons. I was not one, but deacons and ministry leaders. I must have been something like that. And T.C. looked at all the deacons and said, appreciate all you're doing. You guys are doing so much. And then he said, I want you all to do one more thing. Each of you to take one more job on. So a lot of delegating. Well, let's look at delegating in the Bible. There are examples in the Bible of delegation. I picked out 3, one from the Old Testament, 2 from the New Testament. And you'll not find the word delegation, I don't think, but I think we'll find the principle. So let's look, and we'll start with Exodus 18, the story of Moses and Jethro. Who knows who Jethro was? Father-in-law of Moses, exactly right. So Jethro is the father-in-law of Moses. The Bible also says he was priest of Midian. And in Exodus chapter 18, to set some background, Jethro heard about all that God had done. By this time, Exodus 18, the children of Israel have already left Egypt. We've already had the parting of the Red Sea and all of that. So they're in the wilderness. Jethro hears about everything that's been going on. And he decides he will go and visit Moses in the wilderness. So that's what he does in Exodus chapter 18. So I'm going to just go verse by verse through this. There's a lot to unpack. So verse 13, the next day, I guess after Jethro had arrived, the next day Moses set to judge the people. And the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. Can you visualize that scene? So Moses is on some kind of bench or ledge or something, and just, I don't know how many people. It sounds like it could have been dozens or hundreds, just pressing around, some trying to halfway stay in line. Each one had a complaint or a question or a dispute to be settled. And Moses just took them one at a time and gave them their answer, I guess. So now, in verse 14, when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and all the people stand around you from morning till evening?" What did Jethro say first? Did he ask a question or did he criticize? He asked a question, right? There's a little bit of criticism implied, but
Criticism in your question.
yeah, a little bit implied there. But at least he softened it by asking a question. There's a good model for us. You want to suggest a change? Maybe ask a question. You remember Jeopardy? Put it in the form of a question. And so that's what Jethro did. Why are you doing this thing that you're doing? I've been thinking lately about the things that I say. And I really would like to not criticize, not condemn, not complain. Those three things I'd rather not do. It surprises me how often what pops into my head to say is some kind of complaint or criticism or condemnation. But that's a filter that I'd like to use, not condemn. And now you're going to say to me, Jesus did it. Jesus condemned, and that's right, he did. But two things I'd say about that. Number one, he was Jesus. I'm not. Number two, I don't think that's the most of what he said. I think the most of what he said was good, positive teaching. But it's true, he did condemn the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And maybe there's a time when we should do that as well. But if we examine ourselves and most of what we say, it sounds like a criticism or a complaint or a condemnation, maybe we need to examine our speech a little bit. A lady called me one time, a member of our church. I guess she had heard me make this little speech. So when I asked her the phone, she identified herself. She said, "I really feel the need to," and then she paused. "Communicate," she said. So still a C word, but, and of course she launched into a litany of complaints. But at least she tried to frame it in a positive way, so I appreciated that. Verse 15 is not on this slide. And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God." Did Moses think his explanation was irrefutable? I'm inquiring of God. I'm Moses. Who else could do this? I talk to God face to face. It's like I'm shutting this argument down. I'm Moses. I inquire of God. Do you think it even occurred to Moses there might be another way? I don't think so. Sam's shaking his head. I'm Moses. I'm the one who inquires of God. When I read verse 16, look for the me's and the I's. And when they have a dispute, they come to me. And I decide between one person and another. And I make them know the statutes of God and His laws. I'm convinced Moses thought, I'm shutting this down. I'm Moses. I inquire of God. Moses' father-in-law said to him, what you are doing is not good. Do you think it would have been hard for anyone to challenge Moses on what he was doing? I'm not sure anyone but Jethro could have done that. And there's an application for us here, I think. If you feel like you just need to criticize somebody, you better have a relationship with that person. If you don't, you're wasting your time. You better have a relationship with that person before you seek to criticize. And Jethro did. And we need to know that as well. If you don't, maybe spend some time developing a relationship before you criticize. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. Did Jethro say Moses was sinning, breaking God's law? No. His complaint was a practical one, right? He didn't say he's breaking the law. He just said, this is not workable. This is not workable. Now obey my voice. I'll give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. I can see Moses just nodding his head affirmatively here. So far, Jethro's just described what Moses is already doing. I think Moses is thinking at this point, okay, he gets it now. He sees that I'm the one to do this. But then Jethro maybe surprises him. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people, and chiefs of thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens, and let them judge the people at all times. What did Jethro do in addition to describing a problem? Yeah, he offered a solution. He described a problem, but he offered a solution.
Knowing that people don't have the same abilities, he also was telling him, select people and give them a task that they can handle.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So he said, let some be over, what does it say? Thousands, let some be over hundreds, let some be over 50s and 10s. So when you delegate, Moses, match the job to the person's capability. That's a good principle. You don't want to put a person in a position to fail. Put him in a position to succeed. Give the person a job. These are just good principles for life, I think, but they work in the church as well. Give a person a job, but make sure that his or her capabilities match the job that you're giving them. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. Did Jethro tell Moses just to remove himself entirely? No. You're still involved. You still have a part here. But don't do everything. Did Jethro say, and this is on the previous slide, I think, but did Jethro say anybody can do this job? Paul's already hinted at this. He didn't say anybody can do this job. He actually had some qualifications. Look for able men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people. So Jethro even suggested qualifications. Yeah, men who hate a bribe, and I'm sure that was very common, especially in the system of justice. Yeah, that was probably commonplace, but men who hate a bribe was a qualification. And I think those qualifications or qualifications like that pretty much became the qualifications, number one, for elders of the Jewish community. The Jewish community had elders. We read about elders in the gate, several different books of the Bible. And it's almost a foreshadowing of qualifications for elders today. It seems to me there are similarities and overlaps. And if you do this, God will direct you, you'll be able to endure, and all this people also will go to their place in peace. So Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. Yes?
Jethro went up to him out of concern. So you can think maybe it was a little bit of criticism, but he went to him out of concern for him. And when people get overwhelmed or overworked or overloaded, sometimes we don't see the big picture, or we're just too busy to really think about a solution. And Jethro went to him and said, hey, basically, this would help, And then he took it a step further and he said, and this will help some more. So he was really trying to go to him out of concern and love. And I appreciated that about him. And I think that's why Moses listened to him.
Yeah, very good. So, Jethro went to Moses out of concern for Moses, not out of jealousy, not I'm mad with you, I'm jealous of you, or any of that. It was concern for Moses. And
elaborate, but he also came to him with a solution, which is kind of nice.
yep, didn't just describe a problem, but yeah, don't you love that when somebody comes, here's a problem, here's what I think we can do, and I'll take care of it, if that's okay. I'm saying, yeah, go for it. Brian.
Looking for people with capabilities, there was also an interest in helping those people succeed at those goals. So there was the preparation in making sure they understood what the law was, making sure that they were taught and able, so that, because if that delegation had fallen apart, where would all of that have come back?
Yeah.
It would have all bubbled right back up to Moses.
Yeah, there's a lot more to delegation than just assigning a task. And we're going to see more of that in the next example. But as Brian pointed out, making sure that the individuals are prepared as best you can. Very good. Very good. Let's go to the New Testament. Look at, if we have time, 2 examples, if not at least one. This is in Matthew chapter 10. And this is Jesus calling the disciples together and giving them a task. And he, Jesus, called to him his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and every affliction. After Jesus called these disciples together, what was the first thing he did? First thing. He gave them authority. There's no true delegation without authority. You have to empower a person. Now, it doesn't have to be unlimited. We'll see in a minute. You can put some limits on that authority. Is this all resonating with how you do things with working with Amazon and distribution centers and all of that? You've got to give the person authority. And Jesus did that. He gave them a certain amount of authority to do their job. So whatever that means, it means you can spend this much money or, whatever it is, he gave them authority. Had Jesus ever demonstrated how to do the job? Had they ever seen Jesus cast out demons? So in effect, they'd had some training, to Brian's point. They'd seen Jesus do this. They'd watched him. They'd listened to what he said, what he did. Yeah. They'd seen Jesus do that. Do you think Jesus could do the job better than any one of those disciples? Absolutely. Jesus could do it better than any of them. But he knew that. But he also recognized, I've got to give them the chance to do this. Got to give them a chance. And sometimes that's how it is when we delegate. We just need to accept. The person may not do it exactly like I would do it or exactly as well as I would do it, but this is necessary. We've got to do some delegating. These 12 Jesus sent out, instructing them, go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Did Jesus put limits on the scope of the job? Yeah, he put limits on the scope of the job. That's part of delegating too. Now I want you to do this job, but just for this period of time, or just for this group of people, or just for whatever. So Jesus gave them authority, but he also put limits on the scope of the job. Yes, sir.
One of the limitations not mentioned here, Everett Ferguson points it out in his writings, teaching was not included in this assignment of this job description. He points out that they were still students at this time, and teaching would be applied when Jesus ascended into heaven. They were to preach and to do some acts of benevolence type activity, but teaching was not a part of this at this time.
Very interesting. He gave them one little nugget that they could share. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. But the job, as Michael said, and I had not thought of this, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. That may be part of, I'm just going to assign this task in light of your capability. He knew they didn't understand. They weren't ready to teach about the kingdom. They didn't understand. We know that from other things we read in the New Testament. So he didn't want them. He didn't want them out there making a mess of the teaching.
People may not have been ready for that either.
Yeah, people may not have been ready for that. Elders' authority is limited in scope as well. Have you thought about that? I see. Elders have some measure of authority over one or in one congregation, not the whole county, not the whole state. A lady came to me one time, a member of our church. She said, "This church over here is doing something not good. Can you do something about it?" I said, "No." Thankfully. But that's true. The work of elders is limited to one congregation. That's just something to keep in mind. Ken, you had a...
This whole story here, this case study you got here, is that these were not well-educated men he sent out. These were simple fishermen for the most part, who were not well-schooled, but yet they stepped out in faith. And I don't know whether you're going to get into the subsequent verses there about how much faith they had to have. And when he told them, because he told them not to take anything. Don't take extra clothes with you. Don't take a bunch of money with you. Rely on those who you are teaching to take care of you. That takes a lot of faith to step out like that.
Yeah. Do you think they felt totally prepared to do? I'd say no. That may be another application here. When we delegate, it may take some encouragement. The person to whom we delegate may not be absolutely confident. You may have to say, "You can do this. You can do this." Let's look at one more in the few minutes we have left. Let's look at one more. I call them case studies from Acts chapter 6. Now, in those days, when the disciples were increasing in number, a complaint by the Hellenists arose against the Hebrews because their widows were being neglected in the daily distribution. This is a little bit of an aside, but was the church using church resources to help their own members? Was the church using resources? Yes. Yes. Do we do that? Do we use our resources to help church members? Sure we do. We do. We need to work hard to make sure it's done fairly. That was the problem here. Nobody said you shouldn't be using the money we contribute that way. Nobody said that, but they did say, I'm not sure it's being done fairly. So we need to work hard to make sure it's being done fairly. Did well, let's read a little more first. And the 12 summoned the full number of the disciples and said, it's not right that we should give up preaching the Word of God to serve tables. Did the apostles seem to agree there was a problem, or did they dismiss it? Yeah, I think they agreed there was a problem. They didn't dismiss it. They listened. There's a lesson for us. At least we can listen. If somebody has a concern, at least listen. Most of the time I can't fix whatever somebody's complaining about, but at least I can listen. And it seems the apostles listened. Therefore, brothers, pick out from among you 7 men of good repute, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, whom we will appoint to this duty, but we will devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the Word. Who chose those 7? Okay. Not the apostles, it seems, but the entire congregation. Were those... Let's see, let's go on a little farther. And what they said pleased the whole gathering. And they chose Stephen, a man full of faith and of the Holy Spirit, and Philip, with Prochorus and Nicanor and Timon and Paramenus, Nicholas, a proselyte of Antioch. These they set before the apostles, and they prayed and laid their hands on them. So who... I'm going to make a distinction here. Who chose the 7? Whole congregation. Who appointed? I'd say the apostles appointed. That's what I would call it. Laid their hands on them, prayed for them. Next week we're going to talk more about this, but I want to make a distinction between selecting and appointing. Gave them authority, okay. Kind of implicitly, as they laid their hands on them and prayed for them, they were saying, we deputize you, right? We appoint you to do this task. Were those 7 men Hellenists or Hebrews? Can you tell? I hear can't tell. I hear both.
Based on the names, it may have been a combination.
Okay, based on the name. The only hint we have is in the names. But some of the names sound like Greek names. Some of the names sound like maybe Hebrew names. So that would tend to promote fairness, right? Let's get some of both groups involved. Did any of those 7 go on to serve in different ways later? Stephen, for one. So this is chapter 6. We see Stephen in chapter 7. Stephen went on to other roles. Philip, what about Philip? Yeah, chapter 8, we see Philip again. An evangelist. So he didn't spend the rest of his church career serving tables. He started out doing that, but he went on to be an evangelist. So, we can do different jobs over the course of our church life. I think there's good about that. We learn about different aspects of what goes on in our church family, and we see that here. So let's summarize. What are some points that stood out to you about delegating? Delegating. Wade?
Well, I mean, looking at the examples here, walking backwards, I guess, from where we're at here, but like the disciples followed the example that Jesus set them. And Jesus knew how to do what he was going to do and what he was able to do, which, if we look back at Moses and Jethro, understanding the context that Moses finds himself in that position is right after the fact that he gets water from the rock, and then the defeat of the Amalek, I think.
Okay.
And those are things that were directly tied to him, which are those are things that only he could do, right? And then needing Jethro's advice, though, to understand you don't have to do everything. There are others that can do this work. Not everything needs to be done by you. Jesus already understood that, which is where he goes and he appoints the 12 apostles. Like, these are not things that I have to do. These are things that others can do as well. And I think that the disciples take that a step further than this, where they recognize, because Jesus did it with them, like, this is a thing that we don't have to do, that we can have others assist with.
Okay, good. Do we? Go ahead, Ken.
Yes, what can we draw from this? Well, that the church needs leadership, but then the leadership needs good people to stand up and serve the congregation. These are God-given talents to serve each other as Jesus told us to be of service to others. And as Paul was saying in multiple letters about putting others above yourself and thinking more highly of others, and certainly combating that selfishness that we saw in the Pharisees and the lawyers of their day that would not lift a hand to help with the yoke that they put on the people.
Sure.
It's interesting to see here, these people that were chosen, we didn't have anybody refuse.
As far as we know, nobody refused, so that was good.
So they chose well, but they chose people that were capable of doing what they asked them to do.
Yeah. Capable and apparently willing. Do we see delegation in our own church family? Some? Sam says some. Sam's still clinging to the idea that I had to do pretty much everything when I was an elder.
Sometimes, my experience, man, I just think that one is delegating something to do. You haven't done it before. Sometimes you say, well, I'm nervous about this. I don't think I'm going to do that work. I'm not going to be able to. So the question is, what do you do when the person has been asked to do something and kind of nervous? My experience has been the best thing to do is the person who has to do it. Once you do it once, you learn some lessons. He has to do it again. Feel a little nervous. After several times,
Just doing it, the brain forgets to tell you to be nervous, and you just do it.
Yeah, there's something to be said for doing it. Janet and I had a couple of Chinese boys that we sort of mentored when we were living in Auburn, and Janet used to cook for them all the time. And one time the boy said, "We're going to cook for you tonight." And they came over and cooked this huge pot of dumplings. And we tried to eat it, and it was horrible. And finally, one of the boys said, "I'm sorry. We thought we could do this." He said, "We watched our mother do it many times." But they'd never done it themselves. So that Bill's point reminded me of that story. Let me leave you with this. Have you thought about that God delegates to us? God delegates to us. God doesn't rain manna from heaven anymore. He wants us to help feed. God gives us the job of preaching and teaching. God gives us the job of being the hands and feet of Jesus in our families and our communities. So I appreciate your attention, and next week we'll look at a couple of more case studies in a different subject. So I hope you'll come back for that.